Good evening, America. Happy Friday. Welcome to the latest edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you as always from Washington, D.C. and the wiredtofishcoffee.com studios. You know this, it's my favorite coffee, not only because it tastes great, but because it does good with all the money that it gets. It gives back to conservation and to Christian groups in America. I like that. You can go right now to wired2fishcoffee.com and get a fantastic 10% discount on all of their great coffee blends, as well as the mugs, including the Just the News mug. You can get an autographed copy of my latest book. Go check them all out and get 10% off when you use the promo code JustNews at checkout. All right, now the headlines. President Donald Trump may be feuding a little bit with Elon Musk, but he had a very good Friday, scoring victories on several fronts. Let's start with the United States Supreme Court, which in the last hour ruled his Department of Government Efficiency is legally allowed to access Social Security data in an effort to root out fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal programs. That's a case the Trump administration has been fighting for weeks. It's a big win for the executive power. Meanwhile, a federal court also handled the Trump White House a victory, and the legacy media a big black eye, ruling this afternoon that the White House has a legal right to ban the Associated Press from certain parts of the White House, including the press room. It's a big blow, as I mentioned, to the legacy media and a win for the White House, which was angered when the AP, one of the most famous news organizations in the world, refused to call the body of water south of Texas the Gulf of America after its former name, the Gulf of Mexico, was changed by the president. And one more one, and this one has a little bit of a Just the News twist to it. Alleged MS-13 gang member Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We've talked a lot about him on the show. Remember, Democrats fawned over him just because he was deported to El Salvador. No, it didn't matter if he was a potential wife beater or a gang member or human trafficker, but guess what? He's heading back to the United States, but it isn't for a victory lap. The Justice Department is bringing him back to face human trafficking charges. Now, if those allegations sound familiar, it's because Just the News first brought you the evidence a month ago showing the U.S. government suspected since 2022 that Abrego Garcia was engaged in human trafficking, including with MSN13. My amazing co-host Amanda Head has a lot more details. Amanda's a story we broke right here on the show.
I know.
And on Just the News. This may fall into the category for Democrats of watch what you wish for.
Yeah, look, this is an instance where truthful reporting leads to action, and it's great to see. And speaking of news media, I have to say at the White House, in the Brady press room and the press offices behind that, not the White House press offices, but the offices for everybody else, signs everywhere for months saying, "We stand with the Associated Press." I mean, it's just...
Yeah, they can stand outside with them because the OEP is
That's
not
right.
in.
That's right. Do you stand with them? Stand outside.
I
all
bet
right.
they won't stand with them.
Yeah. All right. So as you said,
Kilmar Abrego. That's great.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the alleged immigrant and alleged MS-13 gang member who was deported to El Salvador and who Democrats have been fighting tooth and nail to bring back to the United States, has now landed back here on U.S. soil, and he is facing charges of alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced it this way just a little while ago.
Abrego Garcia has landed in the United States to face justice. On May 21st, a grand jury in the Middle District of Tennessee returned a sealed indictment charging Abrego Garcia with alien smuggling and conspiracy to commit alien smuggling. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador.
And Attorney General Bondi laid out what the government alleges Abrego Garcia did. It's pretty bad. Check it out.
The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women.
And John, after this announcement came out, I checked all of the headlines over on X, and Axios, very interestingly, so they had a headline that called him a Maryland man again. And they must have had too much pushback in the comments because just a few minutes later, they just said Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They didn't say anything about him being a Maryland man, as they say, which is not a Maryland man.
Here's what's going to happen. The Democrats are going to have made the situation worse for Abrego Garcia's family by using them as a political prop. Because he'll stay here. He'll get convicted in Tennessee, most likely.
Absolutely.
He'll spend some hard time when he's done. 80% he'll get deported. But you know what's going to happen to his wife and child? They're going to get deported now.
Right.
They're not going to see this guy for years. Whereas if they all went back to El Salvador, at least they would be able to see him in the prison there. Democrats used them as a prop, and at the end of the day, the situation just got a lot worse. Now, it's good for America. A guy like this who's human trafficking, we want to indict him. We want to make an example so that maybe people stop doing that horrible human trafficking. You had a fun interview earlier today. I'm sorry I missed it. I was driving back from a speech, but you had a good one, didn't you?
I did indeed. I had a
Yeah.
chance just before the show tonight, as Sean said, to sit down and speak with Texas Congressman Brandon Gill about the Musk-Trump feud, about the big, beautiful bill, about immigration, about a whole plethora of things. So check it out. Joining us now from the Lone Star State, Congressman Brandon Gill. Congressman, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Sir, I imagine that you, like most of us up on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., woke up yesterday thinking, well, it's kind of a slow news day, not a ton happening. The big, beautiful bill has been passed on to the Senate, and then all of a sudden things imploded on social media between President Trump and Elon Musk. Is this something that is going to be long-term damaging to the future of the big, beautiful bill? Do you anticipate any reconciliation? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, you know, it seems like a nasty divorce is how I would put it. And people say things in divorces, but the reality is President Trump is the leader of the party. He's the leader of the MAGA movement. And he's the one who initiated this one big, beautiful bill that we are going to get passed. We're still working on it. The Senate is working on it. We're going to get this thing done. This has all of the priorities that Republicans have been talking about for a long time, particularly border security and tax cuts. So no, this is nothing more than a bump in the road, and hopefully we can move on pretty quickly.
Yeah. What do you anticipate is going to be the condition of that bill when it finishes in the Senate? Do you think it will be made better?
I do. I think that we had a pretty good product that came out of the House to the Senate. It's something we spent a ton of time working on and negotiating. And as you know, there are all kinds of different factions in the House who disagreed on a lot of things. But we were able to get a good product over to the Senate. There are some things, and the president has said this, that the Senate can do to make this bill even better than it is. I would like to see them perhaps adjust the SALT cap a little bit. I think that we set that a little bit too high. I think there are some things on the Green New Deal that they could work on as well. But by and large, I think they're going to get this bill done. I think they'll make some small minor changes to it. They'll get it back to the House, and we will get it passed before July 4th.
Yeah. Congressman, as you well know, the wheels of government move very slowly. And I know that Elon Musk appeared to be angry at President Trump. But I think that his anger maybe was founded in the fact that maybe it was just frustration, because I think a lot of people get up to Capitol Hill or to Washington and they see how slowly things move. They go up there with so much gumption and excitement and fire in their belly, and then things just don't happen. Like a lot of the stuff that Elon recommended through Doge, he didn't see that transpire. Do you think that's part of it too?
Perhaps that's part of it. You know, there's a difference between government, unfortunately, and the private sector. We're not run by a CEO. We've got to negotiate changes, particularly in a piece of legislation that's as big as this one is. There are lots of different people who represent areas across the country who have diverging views on different minor issues, and sometimes it takes a little longer than you would expect. You don't get 100% of what you'd like to see in the bill, but I think we got pretty darn close here. So maybe there was a little bit of disappointment there. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Congressman, I know one thing that a lot of people wanted to see in that bill, yourself included, which is NPR and PBS getting defunded. Even if you agree with their programming, the fact that it was costing the American taxpayers money and there are redundant programs that aren't shoving propaganda down the throats of children, that, you know, I think is a very good reason. But it was becoming leftist, woke garbage that they were feeding children.
That's right. This is nothing more than state-sponsored media in the United States, the same kind of state-sponsored media you would expect to see in China or North Korea. And they have a long history of promoting left-wing propaganda. NPR very famously, of course, in their own words, said that the Hunter Biden laptop story was nothing more than a distraction, and they therefore would not cover it. They absolutely refused to cover it. And that was a deliberate decision that they made. You see all kinds of left-wing programming from PBS targeted towards children, promoting values that so many Americans don't agree with and find morally repugnant. So these are institutions that Republicans have been talking about defunding for many, many years, going back to the 90s or even earlier. Republicans have been saying, listen, it doesn't make sense for us to fund media. And I think that's particularly true now in a media environment where it's easy to start a podcast. You can start a new network. You can give your political opinions on Twitter. It's a very different world than it was in the 1960s when this funding actually began. So we've been talking about this. We're finally going to do it. We're going to vote on a rescissions bill next week to defund NPR and PBS, and I think we're going to get that vote through.
Yeah. Congressman, I want to ask you about something that I think you'll have a unique perspective on. You look at the body of Congress, and it is an aging body on both the Republican and the Democrat side. But on the Republican side, you seem to have more fresh faces, people within their first or their second term in Congress, people like you who are up there who are ready to do the work for the American people. Does it feel like to you in that body as a whole, or maybe at least within the Republican caucus, that there's no matter how small, a perceptible culture shift?
I think that the Republican Party is embracing young people, and that's in stark contrast to the Democrat Party, which is aging rapidly, and you can see it. They're significantly older than Republicans are on average. So you can see the Republican Party embracing young people and embracing things that young people care about. Young people don't like being told what they can and can't say. They don't like being censored online. They certainly don't like the federal government directing social media companies to censor social media posts. That's something they don't agree with. But young people also have grown up in an economy and in a world where, due to a variety of factors, including mass migration and terrible economic policies from the left, they have less economic opportunity than past generations did. We're going to fix a lot of that with this one big beautiful bill, which secures the border and funds deportations, but also extends the Trump tax cuts. Those are things that young people care about, that they will benefit immensely from, as will every American.
Absolutely. Speaking of an aging population, you've got every Democrat out there trying to get their pound of flesh, capitalizing on Joe Biden being out of office. And I guess what has now become accepted reality, it was always reality, but accepted reality on the Democrat side of the aisle to talk about Joe Biden's cognition, including his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre. What do you make of this about face when it comes to people who were formerly defending Joe Biden, even criticizing people who brought up his mental capacities or lack thereof?
What I would like to know is, what did Karine Jean-Pierre know when she was press secretary for Joe Biden? She had to have interacted with him extensively. I mean, she was his voice for the Biden White House. What did she know, and was she telling the truth? We know there were a lot of things she didn't tell the truth about. But does that include Joe Biden's age and his cognitive state? I think it's pretty clear that she wasn't being very straightforward with the American people. So I don't put a whole lot of credibility into this. This seems to be just pure opportunism on her part. She had a great job at the White House being press secretary. Now that that's over, she's ready to cash in with a big book deal.
Yeah. Before I let you go, I have to ask you about immigration. Today, my home city of Los Angeles, ICE raids across the city at Home Depots, which, frankly, a lot of illegal immigrants hanging out in those parking lots. But I can already see the PR crisis happening. How do Republicans, and look, it's defensible. It is absolutely defensible because these people are illegals. But how do you defend that when it comes to the optics? Because the optics aren't great.
Well, I would say that we're a nation of laws. These people came into our country illegally. Yeah. And what is the impact of that? The impact of that is to reduce working class American wages because of this mass influx of relatively cheap labor. That's something that harms American citizens. And what we're doing is putting American citizens first, putting our people first, prioritizing their interests. So if you're an illegal alien, you shouldn't be here to begin with. You need to leave. And if you're not going to leave on your own, you're going to get deported. That's the message that we're sending right now.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I hear the sad stories out there about someone whose grandma has been here for 40 or 50 years, and I just think to myself, well, then she's had 40 or 50 years to get her business in order and to apply the right way. So it's unfortunate, but I think you're right. I mean, this is an age of law and order, and glad that you're there on Capitol Hill representing Texas. Congressman Brandon Gill, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, coming up, more on that very disturbing story that John broke over on justthenews.com about the Chinese scientists smuggling in a dangerous biopathogen. Why was federal money flowing to them? Well, that's next.
Hey, folks, if you've been following the facts, not the spin, you know we're living through a pivotal moment in American history. In just the first 5 months of President Trump's return, we've seen measurable progress. Border security is tightening, deportations are up, woke and DEI policies are being dismantled, and our military is being restored to strength as a fighting machine. These are real actions, not talking points, but here's what the facts can also tell us. One man can't fix everything. Congress needs to get in line with American people, and that's where you come in. Join AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, at amac.us/justnews for as little as $12 a year. You'll get their award-winning magazine, valuable discounts, and access to free resources. But more importantly, you'll be part of a movement committed to protecting the values that made this country great: faith, family, and of course, freedom. Don't just read the headlines, help shape them. Join me and become an AMAC member today by going to amac.us/justnews and stand with millions of informed Americans right now.
Welcome back to Just the News, No Noise. Just the News obtained memos a few days ago. We reported it right here on the show about the Chinese scientists who smuggled in that dangerous biopathogen, which had the potential to cripple American food production. And if smuggling the pathogen wasn't bad enough, the memos reveal that there is a federal money trail leading back to the Chinese nationals. So how does this keep happening? And with us to discuss more about that, the director of the China Policy Initiative at the America First Policy Institute, Adam Sabat. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
I suppose this keeps happening because you have universities there in Michigan who, as we were just discussing during the commercial break, 4 strikes. How does this keep happening, both in the government and on university campuses?
Well, it keeps happening because it's systematic. These relationships are systematic and approved and in public. As I was mentioning over the break, these universities, public universities, as the University of Michigan is, have research partnerships, have institutes, some of them in China that are in cooperation with the CCP, some of them that feed into the People's Liberation Army with sensitive technologies, robotics, AI, et cetera. And these are in the open. The House Select Committee on the CCP released a report, I think it was early last year, 24, naming and shaming public universities in the US that engaged in these research partnerships. The University of Michigan was one of the ones that pulled out publicly, and good on them for that. But as we mentioned, 4 strikes. That was one strike. Another one a couple of years ago, 5 University of Michigan Chinese Spartan students showed up outside the perimeter of a Michigan National Guard base. Not any base, it's a base where we are training the Taiwanese military. Very relevant to CCP security. Also, a Chinese student voted in the 2024 election and recently was able to leave the country. And now we have this fungus situation. So this is systematic.
Yeah. And what's most shocking to me is that it's impossible for the intelligence community not to know what China's up. We know that they have ill intentions in all of these things: the spy balloon, COVID-19, the fungus, the pathogen, the illegal voting in our elections. We just seem, even in government, no matter who's president, but we seem to be facilitating China's worst behavior against us. We couldn't shoot down the balloon. We couldn't stop a grant from going to Chinese scientists who almost wiped out crops. Why do we have this blind spot in government? Why do we have this inaction in government?
Well, I'll give government officials and society and media credit to some degree because the Chinese are very good at what they do, the CCP, I should say, acting nefariously. Basically, any hole that we plug, they will find another way. It's like water finding another chute to run down here. But yeah, there is some incompetence for sure. There is some lack of coordination. I do feel better that there are now Trump appointees in place. Higher level appointees in place. It's very slow getting a lot of these folks in place. But yeah, it takes vigilance. It takes vigilance, at the level of CFIUS, the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, that's supposed to screen the incoming investments, including land and infrastructure investments. But in many cases, it comes down to individual activism, individual awareness. activism and bills being introduced in our states. We do find a lot of those bills being introduced to protect agricultural land as well as land near sensitive infrastructure and military bases, as we noted with the Michigan National Guard base. So that's one avenue. Also, an instance where it took citizens themselves, the Confucius Institutes, which we used to have dozens or perhaps over 100 of them on our college campuses. They are nearly defunct, and that is because of exposure and activism from local citizens and media and that sort of thing. Now, they are being replaced by CSSA's, Chinese Student and Scholars Association, which fulfill many of the same functions, and they're a little bit more under the radar. But that's the thing. We need to keep pushing them. We need to keep blocking them, so it gets harder and harder for them to find a way around these measures.
Yeah. And I think the water analogy is apt, but I do think there is one big hole that we can plug, and I believe it was Congressman Riley Moore from West Virginia who introduced the Stop CCP Visas app because of the coordination, because of basically the direction of CCP sending their students here to the United States for intelligence gathering and other nefarious missions. Is that maybe one of the most productive ways to put an end to some of this?
I think it is. I think the visas is the right place to focus on. And of course, Secretary of State Marco Rubio made a very strong statement about being more aggressively revoking visas, specifically of CCP-tied students and those in critical fields. Now, the thing is, there was no enforcement mechanism mentioned. There were no details mentioned. Now, maybe they do have some things in the works, but again, I would say awareness is the top priority. Awareness is key. The fact that he said that, the fact that he put it front and center, the fact that it kind of provoked the CCP, they had a reaction saying, oh, this shows that the U.S. is an unfree society and you're cracking down on our students' ability to express themselves and engage in research. That only exposes the CCP, because if you put up you don't even need to put up a magnifying glass. You simply look at the CCP, and of course, there's no freedom of expression. Corporations have no freedom to invest and act in the way they wish without government approval. So this is the similar attack to the fentanyl. Highlight an absolutely egregious thing that the CCP is doing, allow them to react, and then, in the meantime, try to backfill some policies to make it happen. But it is dicey, both optically and legally, to work on this visa issue. But the bottom line is, okay, America first, American citizens first. We have an obligation to our students to free expression. We have an obligation to our students to matriculate and build skills and this sort of thing. If we can also educate foreign students and they can enrich the campus community, that's wonderful, but we are not obligated to do so.
Yeah, especially if they're engaged in things like smuggling and spying. Adam, I want to ask a little bit about China. I think everyone was saying, oh, Donald Trump is going to put America on a collision course and China's so strong. And they are. Listen, they're clearly, but it looks to me like China is in a very weakened position right now. Its economy seems to be very tenuous because it doesn't have a marketplace when America is not available to it. And it also seems to have a real estate crisis. Is China more economically wounded than maybe the media is letting us know?
I do always go back to the fact that they are more vulnerable than we are, because exactly like you said, they rely on the exports. They export at least 3 times more to us than we do to them. And the only way to get out of that is either to create new export markets, and the EU is pretty much tapped out. They're trying to export to Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, they're big markets, but they can't quite replace the United States. So either they need to make new export markets, or they need to rev up their own consumption within China. And the thing is, in the last 20, 25 years, this whole period of free trade and then being in the WTO, their entire economy has been oriented to producing to export. So they can use lots of different methods to try to prime the pump with their central bank. As you point out, they have a real estate crisis. That's where a lot of the value was stored, because they didn't have reliable places to invest in businesses, et cetera, what we do here. Yeah, they're running out of methods. Now, listen, they can still inflict a great deal of pain on us, but yes, it comes down to how much pain are they willing to absorb while they inflict that on us. And they have a very inflexible system of making decisions. Xi has consolidated power, and then so you have really one person and maybe a few trusted advisors, and you never know if he's getting the right information, and if he is, whether anyone's checking him on his logic. So that's another disadvantage they have, is very fragile or inflexible leadership.
Yeah. Adam, before we let you go, I know this is already being addressed at a federal level, but even on a state level, states like Arkansas and Missouri, other Republican-led states, they are getting the Chinese farmland and properties out of there. Meanwhile, you have Katie Hobbs, the governor of Arizona, a Democrat, who vetoed a bill banning those purchases for that land in Arizona. What gives?
Yeah, that's a big problem. And I think in this case, it's really literally virtue signaling, because, these bills are complex. They're happening in dozens of states, probably 20 plus states, depending on how you measure what is a measure like this. Sometimes they're focused only on agricultural land. Sometimes they include military bases and infrastructure. So these laws vary. A lot of amendments get put in, so it gets very complex. But it seems this was a pretty straightforward one that blocked the CCP from owning land within a certain radius of military bases. It's hard to understand why you would be against that. And in Arizona, it's not only the military bases; they also have huge plants now that are being built by TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor company, which was a huge investment in our economy, a huge investment in us being able to be self-sufficient in semiconductors. That's a type of infrastructure in a sense, and $100+ billion has been invested in Arizona. And yeah, there's a lot worth protecting in Arizona and all of our states, and these measures need to be passed to protect us.
Yeah, absolutely. Director of the China Policy Initiative at AFPI, Adam Savitt, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
All right, everybody. After the break, we're going to discuss ending anti-Semitism at America's universities. How can we do it? We're going to talk about that next. And before we go to break, I want to remind everybody to tune in tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern right here on Real America's Voice for a special called The Rio Reset. Eric Walding is going to take you through a full hour and explain how to keep your financial assets safe if a disaster were to occur, like, for instance, the collapse of the U.S. dollar. And with our mounting debt, that isn't out of the realm of possibility, unfortunately. So that's tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern, but in just a few minutes, we'll be right back.
Welcome back, America. Just a few seconds ago, the president made some comments on Air Force One. We're going to get that to you before the end of the show. We're trying to get our hands on it right now. But first, we're going to turn to something that the president has been focused on like a laser, and that is the demise of anti-Semitism. He wants to end it in our universities, on our streets, in all of our institutions. Joining us now, a man who's been on the front end of that fight. He's a higher education expert and CEO of Cheeky Scientists, I love that name, and an organization that helps PhDs get hired. He is Dr. Isaiah Henkel. Doctor, good to have you back on.
Great to be here. Thank you.
All right. A lot has happened since the last time we had a chance to speak with you. I think the most troubling is we've had 2 episodes of what has become hateful language and hateful protests and horrible behavior, now escalating to murderous behavior outside a Jewish museum here in D.C., and then in Boulder, Colorado, setting pro-Israel vigil attenders on fire. This has really escalated in the last few weeks.
I agree. And I think it ties into the spotlight that's on these universities, because these universities are indoctrinating people and really going beyond that. They're bringing in people on these foreign visas. Very often they're uncapped, which means they can bring in as many as they want to. And then they're indoctrinating them on these anti-Israel sentiments. They're protecting them when they're violent in terms of their protests and against, very directly against Jewish students. And then they keep saying, it's about freedom of speech. There's a difference between freedom of speech and inciting violence, encouraging violence, allowing violence. And so when you see over and over again for months and months and months, years now, ever since October 7th, that this violence is allowed against Jewish students, it empowers people that are crazy and will go out and kill Jews. And so how are we not making these connections? This is why there's a spotlight on Harvard, Columbia, MIT, where you see students that stood up just this last weekend during graduation speeches. Somehow they all have presidents that are giving speeches, the student body presidents, saying that Israel is the problem, that the Jewish students are the problem. that they want to wipe them out, right? They're using more subtle language than that, but it's also very forceful and clearly anti-Semitic. And as long as they allow that to happen, the violence is going to continue. So we have to shut down these universities, and that's why I'm glad Trump has a spotlight on them.
Yeah. Dr. Henkel, I'm probably aging myself a little bit, but when I was in college, what was trendy was things like low-rise jeans and velour tracksuits. Now it seems like it is trendy to be an anti-Semite, to support Hamas, but they have taken it from being trendy to being violent. And I understand that when the atmosphere allows for that to happen, obviously that is on the fault of the university officials. But what's causing it to happen on a granular level? Are these students feeding off of each other?
No, it's coming from the people that run these universities and where their funding comes from. So where do they get their funding, right? Follow the money. They get their funding from these foreign students who can pay very often full out of pocket. We're looking at like $60,000 a year, right? They also get their funding from students that can get on these student loans as long as these universities are accredited. So they get that money. That's what they're going after. And how do they get that money? Well, they have to appeal to the students once they get in there and virtue signal that America is bad. So as more and more foreign money comes in, as long as they're propped up by the money here from foreign aid from the government, the student loans, it's going to continue. But you have a culture among the faculty. Look at the people that were out there on these violent protests. The faculty was there too. The faculty was standing up for this. They're the ones that are teaching the students. They're the ones that are allowing these pro-Palestine or pro-Hamas supporters to come into their classrooms, say whatever they want, chase Jewish students around. They're supporting this. They have it right up on their website. I've put this on X and some other social media sites. I've seen it out there. Right on the MIT website for their faculty. They have stuff saying, essentially, eradicate, right, Israel from the river to the sea. This is still there. And so as long as that is what's being allowed to be taught, and they're not shutting down this behavior, as long as they're all trying to bring in as many non-Americans as possible, which they're doing because of these uncapped visas, as long as this kind of weird virtue signaling where it's, like you said, it's trendy to be pro-Palestine and anti-Israel is allowed, it will continue. The only way to stop it is to shut it down, and that means shutting down the money.
Yeah. That process seems to be well underway. Accreditation is being put under the microscope. Grants are being put under the microscope. Visas for students under the microscope. And I assume those three lead to the potential of ending student loan potential at some of these universities. Is Trump doing the right thing? Is he on the money trail right now?
Yeah, I've been impressed. There's so much. I've been impressed and a little bit distraught because there's so many different avenues of money going to these universities. It's absolutely egregious how, if you want to start a small business in the U.S., right, good luck getting any of these federal grants, right? Good luck getting even an SBA loan approved unless you're DEI, right? But if you want your university that's gigantic and has a multi-billion-dollar endowment, like a Harvard, a Columbia, MIT, and you want steady streams of federal income, you have it through these grants, through the accreditation, et cetera. So the lifeblood of these universities is the money. And they are hurting, right? There's been about once a month, a university or college is shut down over the past couple of years in the US. It's accelerating. It's starting with the smaller, the mid-size. He's targeting Harvard in particular, and then, Columbia, lesser extent, MIT, and some of the others, to make an example out of them. They cannot survive on their own without these subsidies. And they cannot survive on their own, again, with even if they take their tuition annually to $100,000 a year, which they probably will, right? They can't survive just by doing that because they need people to pay it. Most people can't pay that, especially in the US, so they get these federal loans, these student loans. So if we stop them from being accredited, which the Department of Education can do, then they're no longer eligible to have students go to their schools using financial aid from the federal government. That is a powerful lever. But of course, grants and everything else, it all adds up.
Yeah, important stuff. You've had the right strategy for a long time. It's a great honor to have you on the show, Dr. Henkel. Have a great week, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you both, you too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that conversation as always. All right, folks, we're gonna take a quick commercial break. Before we do, a little breaking news. If you remember that police chief from Arkansas who was convicted of murder and rape, he was the focus of that movie, Devil in the Ozarks. He just was captured. The manhunt is over. They have captured him. He's back behind bars. That's good news for the people of Arkansas. All right, we're gonna take a quick commercial break. When we come back, our weekly Just the News health update with our good friend, Dr. Chad, right after these messages. Hey folks, let's be honest, our body lets us know, right? We're not getting any younger. And if you want to look and feel your best, you need to check out our good friends at Pure Health Research. They have 45 premium health supplements designed to help with every health goal, whether it's boosting your energy, trimming belly fat, supporting healthy blood sugar, pumping your testosterone up, or even reducing swelling in your legs. Pure Health Research Supplement Store has you covered. Each formula is crafted with natural, non-GMO ingredients backed by clinical research and manufactured right here in the good old USA. And here's the best part. Pure Health Research is offering you an exclusive 35% discount. You heard me right, 35% off. Just go to purehealthresearch.com and use the coupon code JUSTNEWS at checkout. With their 365-day money-back guarantee, there's zero risk in trying something new, so why wait? Head over to purehealthresearch.com right now. Explore their 45 amazing supplements and save 35% before this deal ends with the coupon code JUSTNEWS. Don't miss this chance to feel your best. All right, welcome to our Just the News Health Update brought to you by NativePath. Joining us now, the co-founder and chief culture officer at NativePath, our good friend, Dr. Chad Walding. Dr. Walding, good to have you back on.
Hey, John, good to be back. Thank you for having me.
Since the last time we talked, a lot of things have happened on the health front. In fact, almost every day there are historic things. I want to turn to one that a lot of people are talking about. It's very personal in my family. I have an autistic child. RFK saying he's going to get to the forefront of what's causing autism and start getting the right research and support to families who are dealing with this. I think we're down to 1 in 31 kids that have some form of an autism spectrum disorder. Tell us a little bit how we got to this point and what RFK's declaration of war on autism may mean for health going forward.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of conversation happening around this topic, and it's very polarizing and very personal to a lot of people, just like yourself, you know. And to me, as a physical therapist, it's something I've seen a lot. I've treated a lot of people with autism, treated a lot of children with autism, you know, gone into these people's homes and really sensed the challenges that people can have with it. So I appreciate the sensitivity of it and understand the polarization around it. You know, I always step back and I look at trends. I look at what's been happening in the past 100 years, and we're hearing about these stats that I think are pretty concerning that we should pay attention to. You know, we're hearing about things like in 1983, 1 in 10,000 children were being diagnosed with autism. In 2013, it was 1 in 88. 2018, 1 in 36. You know, like you said, in some areas it's even higher. I think in California, 1 in 22. And then we're seeing trends in vaccinations of what the stats are saying, right? The CDC schedule of 1983, 10 vaccines were given to children at birth. 2013, 32. 2018, 74 vaccines. So there's a trend in both of those directions. You know, I think it's important to know that, like, when we see these things, and where there's a correlation, it's a correlation. It's not necessarily a causation, which is where a lot of people are getting heated. But I do appreciate that RFK is really researching into this to find if there is causation. That's why he's doing all this autism database collection. I think that data is needed, which is also sensitive because people don't like giving up their personal information. You know, my thing is the rise in autism is just in line with the rise of many chronic diseases that we experienced in this country over the past 100 years. You know, just as we've had rises in autism, we've had rises in chronic disease. In 1930, you know, 7.5% of the people were having chronic disease. In 2020, it's 65%. Heart disease, the first recorded heart attack that we had in this country was in 1912, and now it's over 30%. Obesity rates have climbed from 10% in 1970, and now we're at a state where over 74% of the population is dealing with obesity or being overweight, right? And the same thing carries with autism. It carries with Alzheimer's, you know, mental health disorders. Anything you're seeing in the past 100 years has changed, right? So, you know, my thing is what's behind all this? What is causing it? Is it one thing, or is it a bunch of little different things? And that's the way I feel about it. It has much more to do with how we're living in our modern day, how we're eating in our modern day, moving, living, all of those things, and look at those changes, right? And I think if we look there, we'll find a bigger causation of what's happening with all of this stuff.
That's a really great point. It's a complex picture, and our bodies are subjected to so more chemicals, so many more environmental factors that didn't exist 40 years ago. And in the name of speed, we have fast food, but it's a lot of processed food. When it's all done, do you think that the most likely thing is it'll be a multifaceted cause and effect scenario that we'll be looking at?
I think it is. When I look at it, and the way I've always seen it in the past, 20 years as a healthcare practitioner, is that I lump it into a big box and say humans have gotten off the path, right? When we talk about native path, we see an off the path way of eating, moving, and living, and an on the path way of eating, moving, and living. And that on the path way is getting our biology aligned with what it's designed for. We're looking for principles that are eternal. The things that worked for humans in their health 200 years ago should be the exact same things that work for their health 200 years from now, right? These eternal principles of whole food nutrition, movement, sunshine, good proper hydration, good sleep, these things can't be ignored. They're the foundational things. And if you look at how we've changed in the past 100 years, starting with food, the industrialization of food, the commercialization of food, the introduction of toxic industrial seed oils that our great-grandparents would never recognize, the introduction of massive amounts of sugar and artificial sweeteners in our food. You mentioned the dyes, the red dyes, the blue dyes, all these things. The food scientist, their job has, at this point, food has become a business, right? And
Right.
Their job is to get us addicted to food, right? To get us to where we can't just have one, and to improve our need to keep eating more, right? And that is a big issue. When we're eating whole, real food, it's satiating, right? It's not toxic to our body. Our blood sugar is balanced. But the bigger issue of what's going on behind all of this in our modern day era is an off-the-path lifestyle that is leading to things like insulin resistance, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, possibly even autism and things like that. I think we'll find more answers when we obey the laws of nature.
And autoimmune disease too, which is just so remarkable how much that has exploded in the last decade or two as well. So you talk about getting on the path, and I think that's what makes Native Path so exciting. I have a quick question. It's a personal question to me because it's amused me since it happened, since the last time we talked. I fell, broke my elbow in a couple spots. I've been on collagen for several months now, on the path. And I went just a few days after the injury, and already the bones were fusing. My doctor was legitimately like, wow, I can't believe how fast they're fusing. Does collagen have a role in healing fractures quicker than if I weren't taking it?
Absolutely. And a lot of people, when they think collagen, they've been hearing it probably a lot about it in the marketing lately and seeing ads. They normally think hair, skin, nails, things that are exterior, right? And collagen does help with all that. It's fantastic for that. In fact, like type 1 collagen is plentiful in all of those things. But what people don't realize is that collagen is also what makes up our bones. So I first started learning about this as a physical therapist, trying to help people from fractures, trying to help people before they go into surgeries and help them heal after they had a surgery.
Right.
And started recognizing that collagen was something that was missing in our modern diets, right? It's what makes up those bones. Our ancestors got plenty of it because they would eat nose to tail, they would make soups and broths, and it was a natural part of their diet. But in our modern diet, we're not getting nearly enough. So this is how I started learning about ancestral principles and tweaking things with collagen and having my patients start to supplement with collagen. And I would see the same thing that you're seeing, that your doctor's seeing, is that when you start supplementing with collagen after a fracture or you're going through a healing process, the results start to speed up dramatically, because you're supplying that bone with the raw materials that it needs in order to be strong. The bone health equation that a lot of people think of, when we think bones being strong, most people just think calcium, right? If I just supplement with calcium, that's gonna strengthen my bones. But we have to remember, we supplement with more calcium than any other country, but we have some of the highest rates of osteoporosis and osteopenia. So there's more to the equation. Collagen's one of them, vitamin D, magnesium, weight-bearing exercise. Those are all parts of the picture of making our bones stronger. So I love that you're getting those results and your doctor's happy and was surprised at how
it was
you're
stark.
doing.
I mean, it literally was stark. Like, I got to ask Dr. Chad next time we're together. It's so amazing to get on the path because you just start thinking a different way, then you start living a different way. And we're not just making America healthy, then you're making yourself healthy. And I think that's what's so exciting about our partnership with Native Path. Dr. Chad, we're going to have you back again next week. Folks, in the meantime, here's a homework assignment. Go to getnativepath.com/justnews. Getnativepath.com/justnews. Go start your health transformation today. There's a lot of great discounts there, specifically because of our partnership with Dr. Chad. Go check that out during the commercial break. Start your journey to a healthier living in the future. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Welcome back, everybody. All right, John, let's start on the West Coast and make our way back to this area. But in
Sounds
Los
like a plan.
Angeles today, ICE raids all across the city
Yeah.
on Home Depot lots, and in particular, one place down in downtown Los Angeles. There is a business owner there that is about to be in some very serious trouble. He locked the doors, locked the ICE agents inside of his facility.
Yep.
The FBI was called in. They're in all their riot gear. It does turn into a protest. I mean, I hate to joke about it. LA knows how to protest. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a protest, but sticky situation.
Yeah, well, we've demonized ICE in the
Yeah.
eyes of liberals,
Yep.
and we've lionized people like
Abrego
Abrego Garcia. And so the upside down world that Los Angeles and California, present company accepted, of course, represents is so disconnected from the rest of America. And you're right, whoever did it, whoever locked them in, they're going to be facing some serious hard time.
Yeah, look, I mean, as Congressman Gill said in the first block, this is the presidency of law and order. Law and order is back in style in this country. And you know, I see LA Times every single time there's a sob story. They are printing it out there on repeat. And it's like, are you going to do one of these for every person that's deported?
That's right.
Because you've got folks here who, and they are doing a great job of worst first. They are targeting these areas where you have criminal aliens, people who are engaged in some
that
type of
FBI story
smuggling
we had.
operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Yeah, it's a bad stunt that's probably going to have a great future disincentive not to do it a second time.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe some people want to spend
well,
hard
and
time.
the ICE director had to defend his agents wearing face coverings, and he said it's because there are people out there who are
Who are actually
doxing them,
gonna-
not just them, their wives, their
right.
children. It's absolutely disgusting.
It is disgusting, and we stand with the men and women of ICE, CBP, and FBI because
Absolutely.
they do the hardest of jobs. They really do.
Yeah. Hey, how about them Democrats wanting the Epstein files to come out now?
Well, my goodness, yeah, they'll be
was
disappointed.
fast.
I do think Trump's name will show up in there one or two times because
Yeah.
he had interactions, but not at the island. None of the things that are going to be. They're going to be sorely disappointed, but it gives them something to talk about other than lionizing Abrego Garcia. So.
Yeah. I think he's in there, but if there was anything substantial, anything that Democrats
He would have
could
been out a long
use,
time ago.
that would have been known a
That's right.
long,
I don't think
long
it's- yeah.
time ago. All right, so what do you make of Alan Dershowitz, our good friend, repeat guest on this show, urging a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I'm a little surprised. I don't understand the argument. I haven't had a chance to really do it thoughtfully yet. I just saw the top headline on our site. But, you know, she's not a victim. She knew what she was doing, and there are many women who were damaged and hurt by this sex trafficking operation, and it just doesn't feel appropriate, a pardon from what I know. But Alan's a pretty smart guy, so I'll at least read what he says before I come to a final conclusion.
All right, you've got a story you're working on, collecting documents and such that you're going to be
Yeah.
putting out next week. Do you want to give us a little 40-second tease?
Yeah, listen, I think you're going to find out that the United States government knew by the summer of 2020 that COVID was genetically altered and came out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And it was just kept from decision makers. It was kept from other intelligence agencies. One intelligence agency did fantastic work, but then it was buried and hidden, and Joe Biden's assessment didn't have it. It could have radically changed the history of the first 2 years of the pandemic had it been made public when it did. But now there are pretty serious investigations. FBI, somewhere else, we're going to reveal next week. But COVID cover-up of the umpteenth maximum extreme. I think people are going to be shocked at how specific and accurate this original intelligence assessment was that was hidden from us and the policymakers, including Trump, I think.
Yeah, it's going to... Oh, I love when you have this breaking news and you have all of this stuff that you put out there, because it ends up, I mean, as we saw tonight with Abrego Garcia, it ends up having real-world consequences
You know
for
what I love
for
this
our
week?
country. Yep.
Watching you at the White House in the seat of power, asking really meaningful questions that everybody followed up with and covered a lot of the stuff you did.
Yeah.
It's just so much fun having you here in Washington and
It's good to
watching
be
the great
here.
journalism that you're doing every day.
Absolutely. Thank you for
You got a
having
good
me.
enterprise piece coming up this weekend. I'm excited. You got two of them, actually.
Yes,
Two good ones
indeed.
this
Yes,
weekend.
indeed. Two pieces
Check
coming
Just
up.
the News. Check Amanda's Bites. You got good
All
ones.
right, everybody. That's all the time we have. But before we go, tune in to RAB tomorrow for a new Law and Order special hosted by Ben Berkwam, and it's focusing on the Border Patrol, so you do not want to miss it.